On AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're trying to wrap our minds around ChatGPT and the coming AI revolution, like so many, and trying to help you do the same by talking to experts in the field. Remember, we talked to, talking to one wag from Wired Magazine last week, we referenced another's prediction, that 90% of online content will be AI generated by 2025.
Wow.
If that's true, that's how quickly things are changing. Even if it's not true, it's an indication of the expectation as to how quickly things will change. There's an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal I found interesting, co-authored by Joe Ricketts, of course, Mr. Ameritrade, and the Ricketts family owns the Chicago Cubs. You know Joe Ricketts and the family.
Yes, we do.
But this is Joe Ricketts as a philanthropist, reformer, which he does a bit of. About 20 years ago, he created an organization called Opportunity Education to rethink how we do education. And in his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, he and executive at the organization he founded, Opportunity Education, Ray Ravaglia, argue that while people are concerned about ChatGPT threatening education because of the ability to plagiarize, cheat, actually AI has possesses the prospect to revolutionize education in a positive way and get kids more advanced with respect to their reasoning, critical thinking, argumentation skills than they are in the John Dewey system with which we're still saddled in so many respects. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Ray Ravaglia. He's the Chief Learning Officer at Opportunity Education. And Manuel Mattke is the President and COO of Opportunity Education. Ray, Manuel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure, Dan.
Thanks for having us.
So this is a jump ball here, whoever wants to take it, but just give us sort of the broad argument in favor of ChatGPT and other AI innovations when it comes to primarily primary education, K through 8 and into high school.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one there, Dan. I think the key thing that ChatGPT does for us is it shows the weakness of any system of education that is just based on giving people information, because information is increasingly the sort of thing we can just ask the computer for and it will serve it up. What people need to learn how to do is use that information and to use the AI tools as tools. So it's not just having an answer to a question, it's knowing which question to ask and then what to do with that answer when it comes back. If we have more answers flowing in, then it's going to be important for students to know how to take that information and make sense of it, shape it, build arguments, reason with it, and so forth. And I think that is really going to be the fundamental turn here, is to stop acquiring information and start actually learning how to do things with information.
What's the just like, let's get baseline here, because, you know, it's a ChatGPT is described as like a sophisticated autocomplete, but obviously it's much more than that, and the potential is much more than that. So what does ChatGPT do that Google searches don't in terms of quickly accessing information and then having to formulate arguments or context around it?
Well, the big difference between ChatGPT and Google, which is also why Google and other companies like that are terrified of it, is that Google will give you, 9 million responses to a question, and you have to still click links, you still have to figure out what to do with it. ChatGPT, when you ask a question, it will actually write you a response that could be an essay if you ask that kind of a prompt, or just collect information but give you one singular and authoritative response. It may not always be accurate, but in all my playing with it, it's pretty darn good. And it's probably as good as any average person will give if it has the background information and has been trained on it.
Well, we know the two largest public school districts, New York and Los Angeles, have banned the chat box from their devices, but how can you stop kids from circumventing that system and using it?
Well, I don't think you can, and I think that natural curiosity shouldn't be repressed. It should be encouraged, and letting kids know that it's there and what it can be used for, and then getting them to use it productively is really going to be the challenge for educators.
Well, so one of the other issues, though, is bias, and there was a guy who did a good tweet on this. He asked ChatGPT to formulate two answers to two questions. One was describe a debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump where Joe Biden is the victor. And it had this long detailed, how Joe Biden was superior in his presentation of the evidence. And then it had describe a situation in which Donald Trump and Joe Biden debate and Donald Trump is the winner. And it gave this, it basically punted it. It said, well, we can't exactly come up with a scenario in which this would possibly. So, I mean, so there's the who, what's the intelligence that shapes the artificial intelligence question.
And it really is just a content question, and I suspect that more and more bots like that will get trained on very specific topics and will, quote, become experts, if you will, on those topics. But clearly, this is just a matter of the machine ingesting information, processing it, and then having the ability to formulate sort of complete sentence responses as opposed to giving you a list of results. So ChatGPT and any similar generative AI is entirely dependent on whatever body of information it's ingested and learned from, and is, as a result, beholden to its creators. And that gets back to Ray's point, is that today we use spreadsheets all the time and calculators. Nobody's worried about needing to ban calculators in schools because they somehow automate some function of work. And I think the same is true with any kind of writing or even analytical work. And the key here is students need to start switching away from the grind work of producing things that you can send home as homework where you don't have to worry about it as a teacher. They just have to somehow produce it, and instead have to shift more in the direction of analyzing, interpreting, establishing meaning of what things are, and doing the work that will shape what the robots and what the AIs actually can produce and how they produce it, rather than replicating that.
So I like that. I like that prospect, but I just, on this bias question, I mean, it seems to me then we're back to the same sort of argument we've been having over Twitter and Google and Facebook for the last several years, is show us your algorithms. So with ChatGPT, it's going to show us the body of information that provides the basis for the machine learning. So is it, if you're just, we only look at news reports from, the top 5 quote unquote news networks and these daily newspapers, well, that's a very limited universe of information, and people need to know that it's pulling from very incomplete sources that have a shared perspective on so many issues.
Yep. Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think too that we'll see things like, if there's strong bias on one side of the spectrum, there will inevitably be somebody producing a chatbot that's been trained up on, more right-leaning stuff than left-leaning stuff, and you'll have your Fox bot versus your MSNBC bot. And I think what will happen eventually is the opportunity for these, more sophisticated emerging systems that might produce several different answers from several different bots, and then it comes down to training the students on how to sift through stuff and to understand that no matter what you get, even if it's from the robotic oracle, is still something that is ultimately grounded in human perspectives, which are going to be inherently biased, and that working towards truth takes real effort.
Yeah, right. No, that's a fair point. You mentioned Google, and while Google's terrified of this, Paul Buchheit, who is the creator of Gmail, tweeted, Google may be only a year or two away from total disruption. AI will eliminate the search engine result page, which is where Google makes most of its money. Even if they catch up on AI, they can't fully deploy it without destroying the most valuable part of their business. I mean, talk about the gales of creative destruction here. The prospect that a juggernaut like Google could be disrupted or worse by ChatGPT and other AI, that's sort of remarkable. Do you agree with that prospect?
Yeah, I do, because search results are pretty clumsy, and Google itself replaced other search engines that seemed even clumsier before, and the fact that they could index everything, but now indexing isn't that big of a deal anymore. It's really the question of how do you get answers. It does amplify the concern that you raised, Dan, which is if you don't know what the sources are behind that, because you're not choosing from a long list of results like you do in Google, that the opportunity and the risk of significant bias is as extreme as it is in all of our search bubbles on Facebook or Twitter, whatever we're looking at. So finding ways to make that more transparent is going to be key for all that stuff to work.
So, I mean, then this it just goes back to, if you're doing a paper on competing philosophies, and it's say it's capitalism versus Marxism, and so on the one hand you have the Marx Engels reader as source material, on the other hand you have Milton Friedman's Free to Choose as source material, just to use two examples. Then does ChatGPT present capitalists argue for this way of organizing an economy and a society based on this, and cites Milton Friedman, and a Marxist would argue this and cites the Marx Engels reader, and then you have students working through to identify other sources, try to understand the arguments, distill them. Is that sort of your vision of how this improves education, reasoning, critical thinking?
I think that's an excellent example. I think getting the material out in front of the students more quickly so that they can look at it, source it, and then build on top of it is going to get them to a better place. I think that having a sort of educationally tweaked chatbot that does clearly specify sources and citations so that students have a place to build from certainly works. I think the other thing, too, is if I'm a teacher and I've had the same essay prompt that I've used for the last 20 years, and now my students are just handing that to ChatGPT and it's writing the essay for them, I may need to actually shift my game and start saying, okay, look, I need everybody to give me a draft where you outline the points you're going to make. Okay, now I need everybody to give me an essay. Now we're going to go through and work on the revision process. And so we move away from just producing an essay to actually working on the whole skill of organizing information, generating information, revising information, and getting something that is maximally persuasive. And that's not something you can just hand back to the AI at each stage. That's something the students are actually going to have to do the work on.
Yeah, that does sound more robust, doesn't it? Yeah.
And go back to the Google analogy, Dan, right? They're terrified. School districts are terrified because, like Ray says, it's going to challenge them fundamentally to rethink what their work actually is. And I think they prefer not to do that, honestly, because it's going to shift what teachers need to do. It shifts how teachers are trained. It shifts how we evaluate performance by students. And that kind of a disruption, I think, is going to challenge them very significantly to figure out what education means in the sort of ChatGPT or post-ChatGPT world.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm intrigued by anything that would disrupt how we do K through 12 education at present. So, and if it makes teachers unions and big school districts nervous, that's probably a good indication that we're over the target. Ray Ravaglia, Chief Learning Officer at Opportunity Education, Manuel Mattke, President and COO of Opportunity Education. Gentlemen, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And they both joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Start your new year off right by finally losing that weight. Schedule your consultation with NJ Diet today. Their scientific approach will ensure that you lose the fat quickly and safely. NJ Diet uses your hair and saliva samples, along with their bioenergetic scans, to personalize natural solutions and supplements that balance your hormones where the side effect is weight loss. You'll shed a contractually guaranteed 20 to 40 plus pounds in only 40 days. Then NJ Diet uses DNA testing to help you keep it off. NJ Diet is all natural, no shots, no hormones, no surgery, and no prepackaged foods. Full supervision is provided every step of the way, and you even get the doctor's personal email and phone number. With locations in Skokie and Oak Brook, or from anywhere with live online video consultations, lose 20 to 40 plus pounds in only 40 days, guaranteed.